The Blizzard situation is worse than they told us. Canceled games, we already know that's happening and stuff. What is going on? Let's see what Bellular figured out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. So, as they say, the devil is in the details. Now that it's been 24 hours, well, we have a lot more of those details. As you know, 1,900 staff are being laid off from Xbox across Activision, Blizzard, Zenimax, and more studios that they own. And they've been finding out who is safe and who is not over the last 24 hours. And as these reports have came in, we've begun to actually see the scope, to see the damage to even development teams. Because despite what Microsoft claimed, this is not just a reduction of duplicated roles. What we're seeing instead across almost every active development team at Activision and Blizzard is that people are being let go, and the voids they leave behind will impact the ongoing development of every game in the portfolio.
I mean that's really happening industry-wide. It is. And it's just happening, it's just like there's AI now. They're expecting more out of the people they have, and they're just trying to trim down their costs and stuff. It's interesting because Microsoft, it felt like, wasn't going to do this. They didn't, like, when they bought Minecraft, they kind of, got it and then let it do its own thing. And everyone expected the same for Blizzard and Activision, but we're catching, honestly, they acquired them, but it's just at a bad time. It's at a bad time for the industry where there's just layoffs everywhere. So not only were they going to get the typical layoffs with an acquisition, but they're getting more on top of that.
Beyond
and
just
a lot
that,
of canceled
though, Xbox
projects.
is perhaps short-sightedness here, is seeing them eliminate a lot of key player-facing positions. Things like customer support, QA, community management. They
already have that stuff at
very
Microsoft.
big hits. So today I'm going to go through everything we've seen so far. My team have been working, just compiling absolutely everything about this. We're going to work out what it means for them, what it means for you, and ultimately,
everyone did know these
why Microsoft has upended people's lives, just of course as they now have hit a $3 trillion stock valuation cap. Okay, so part of the mood that's particularly rough here is the broader jobs market within games and within tech. There's obviously quite a lot of overlap there, and hey, if your company has layoffs, but otherwise things are fine, and it's a kind of tight labor market, well, yeah, you can probably get a job. The problem here, though, is the games industry layoffs have been absolutely massive. There is less VC money going into the sector. And then there's the sort of thing that's completely unannounced. As an example, not just is the job market...
the games market has been exponentially growing for years now. I just think they're nearing the roof. They're nearing the cap, right? There is a point where growth can't just be exponential over and over forever. So maybe they're just hitting that ceiling, They bypass the movie industry and everything. The gaming industry is huge now, but maybe they're hitting the ceiling. Maybe they're realizing that growth is not just going to continue at this, extraordinary rate forever.
Now flooded with new candidates.
I think that's what's happening in the gaming industry.
Loads of companies have hiring freezes. That's just the sort of thing that happens and
especially with COVID.
Silent, that we never particularly hear about.
It really blew up the numbers.
I can tell you who is actually excited for the future, and that is Mike Ybarra. One of the things that's been doing the rounds, and I think this just shows you... how things are just different for certain people. Mike Garo used to be the president of Blizzard Entertainment. Yesterday was his last day. Now, you can see, of course, the original post we got from him, one that was quite community-focused, really talking about devs, talking about the people who are being impacted. Here, though, is what he has posted on the professional social network, LinkedIn. He said it was great to be part of the team that built Blizzard and Activision over the years, and he's decided to transition out now that it's merging, and he's happy to have helped that succeed. Obviously, that is the merger that has led to these layoffs, so you can really see an element here of tone deafness. Right? Now is not the time for those words. So he said that. He's also said that he's actually taking some time out for a bit to spend some time with family, which of course I support, and also to travel the world. And afterwards, he is looking for hyper growth opportunities with great teams. So that certainly is fun. Again, I bring this up almost just as an optics thing for just how rough the industry can feel. There's the very obvious example of Bobby Kotick's very golden, very large, well, some say golden parachute. Yesterday I called it a golden helicarrier, but hey, basically the same thing. This is a case, though, where all those people are gone, and what's he saying? I'm happy to have, I'm transitioning out now, I'm happy to have made this happen, yada, 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 yada. Obviously, the bizarre
I think
thing...
sometimes they're a bit out of touch. I mean, leadership's a bit out of touch. You got to remember, this guy doesn't have to work another day in his life. He's got so much money that every Yabera will be able to survive on it forever. Um, so maybe he's a bit out of touch, because there are people who got laid off that, are going to struggle now to pay some bills until the industry starts to hire again, which is kind of sad. But for the rich and super powerful, sometimes a layoff is a vacation. That's the truth.
Is at BlizzCon, he said that they would have to
sure he got
drag
some
him
nice
out.
stock
That's
options,
how
too.
long he intends to be staying at Blizzard. So I certainly have to wonder, even though this LinkedIn post does seem rather ghoulish, how much is any of this something that was his decision? Hard to know. First, quick bit of info and context. Number one, the research report for today's video we are posting no paywall, just on our platform, bellular.ghost.io. Of course, if you want to support our team, one of the things I'm doing is trying to have our eggs in more baskets so that we're not overly exposed to, say, YouTube ad revenue, which is historically awful right now. So it's one of the best ways to support what we do, and over there you'll get early access to our content, you'll get our research reports, and every day you will get an edition of Loading Screen. And it's where we cover essentially all of the other news that's going on that we don't end up doing videos about. Okay, so that link's down below. Let's get into things, though. So Xbox's position and all of that. On November 23rd, Phil Spencer appeared on the stage of BlizzCon. Roaring audience. People were pretty happy. The context there was, Bobby gone, Phil here. Phil better. Phil said, we're going to empower our new colleagues in a culture of trust, inclusion, and collaboration to continue what they do best, redefining existing genres, creating new, never-before-seen experiences, and uniting players globally in new ways.
A lot of talk.
Well, they certainly have united players globally in one way with how things have went. The deal closed. We saw a whole bunch of campus tours, the likes of Phil Spencer going to the Blizzard campus, and now, well, we have the axe action.
It was such a happy time, man. They were touring each other's campuses, Xbox and Microsoft, tip to tip, butt slapping everything, and then the axe came down.
The thing, though, is Activision Blizzard had already been essentially doing what we call soft layoffs. This is via a few things. One example would be a hiring freeze. Another one is the forced return to office mandate, where that essentially, from what we understand, was used to sort of reduce headcount, but was happening in and around the same time that they were doing hiring freezes. So they were essentially changing the deal for whom that no longer made sense. They leave the company, and I know that this has impacted several teams, actually, quite substantially, but there's a hiring freeze. So the context in which this new news has been happening is certainly quite rough. So following the soft layoffs, we now have the hard layoffs. With those soft layoffs, well, that's the sort of thing that a company will often do essentially as preparation for a merger. It'll try to downsize so that when Microsoft takes over, the balance sheet for staff costs will be looking a bit more reasonable. Now, of course, everyone understands that there will be overlap and that there will be jobs lost, right? A lot of people's initial response to this, at least that I've seen, has been, yeah, but of course we all saw this coming. What are you really talking about? How is this news? It is news, I think, because of scale. That's one thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of
people. The
people.
other side is specific expertise that cannot really be described by just a Venn diagram of oh, those people have that role there and these people have that role here. Turns out there's more to somebody's work than just their role. There's a lot of other context. And then we've seen far more...
I think the canceling of a lot of projects, too, was a big thing. They really just laid the hacksaw to thing. And that whole survival game's gone now. So it wasn't just layoffs across the board just to stop redundancy between the two companies. No, they just straight up cut some games straight out. This development game, you guys have been doing it 6 years, it's done. We're not doing it anymore. So they did lay the axe. I guess they wanted to trim down the workforce and pinpoint it to the things that they think need to continue in development, and things they didn't, they cut it and fired everyone involved.
Teams be impacted, certainly significantly more than Microsoft let on in their initial memo, and I will cover that shortly in today's video. So yes, duplicated roles being reduced, and take a look at Zenimax. Obviously, they acquired Zenimax. People may not know that name, but Bethesda, Todd Howard, they acquired all of that. And there was no large restructuring, significant layoff, that sort of thing didn't actually happen there. The board of Zenimax was dissolved, but there was no mass reduction in active staff. So because we're seeing 1,900 layoffs across not just Activision Blizzard, but also in some Xbox core studios that have delivered key games, this is not something that is just this merger. And of course, Phil Spencer said exactly why. He said, together we've set priorities, identified areas of overlap, and ensured we're all aligned. So the bit a lot of people focused on is areas of overlap. But set priorities. As an example, it seems that if you really wanted Overwatch 2 PvE to slowly grow, that may not be a priority anymore, and that will be gone. We've seen that across multiple teams. So let's actually get into what this means.
Overwatch is in such a weird place, man. It's in such a weird place because it's actually a great game. Like, I have to say, like, after WoW, Overwatch was the most fun I had playing any Blizzard game when it launched. I really liked Overwatch a lot. I thought it was a great game, well made. It just, I don't know. Maybe it needed a battle royale. I have no idea. Overwatch just fell apart. It did. It just fell off in the industry of FPSs. And has not been able to come back in any way.
Means for players then. Number one, bit of context
here.
Both
fun
Microsoft and Activision Blizzard were profitable companies. These are not layoffs that are, because they're actively burning cash. It's not like their cash position is going down, like they are in profit. So these are both healthy companies. This is essentially them, I would say, optimizing what they've got, because it's better to be optimal than to be suboptimal. So that's why they're making the decision. It's one you would say that they are making at their own discretion, rather than one that they are being sort of extremely forced to make, because literally the numbers are really, really bad. Now, this is also something that's not really about underperformance. The obvious thing, of course, Mr. Iwata, who was president of Nintendo, he's came up in a lot of things. And I definitely do not say any of this to discredit him. But one of the things that's actually interesting there that a lot of people don't know...
your failure
feels fine.
has cost.
Feels fine. Speaking of failure, man, Nintendo's failure with Pal World, that one is palpable. Everybody in the industry has seen that one.
Is Japanese labor law. Essentially, in Japanese law, you cannot really perform layoffs unless all other measures are taken to prevent bankruptcy, and that includes cost reductions. So there are parts there where Japanese law will have informed the decision-making that, that was made in that case. But if you look at his statements about layoffs hanging over people's heads, that's not.
What did he say? He said, if we reduce the number of employees for better short-term financial results, employee morale will decrease. I sincerely doubt employees who fear that they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people around the world. That's so true. That's very true. When I saw the hammer coming down at the firm I was working at, you best believe my fucking work product went to shit. It went to shit, and so did everybody else's. Why? Because we spent most of the day wondering if we were going to be able to log in the next morning. And slowly but surely we weren't. But work was not getting done. The work that was getting done was probably crap, because we were just, our mind was somewhere else most of the time. And guess what? We spent a lot of time doing, too, talking amongst each other rather than working. We're like, who's next? What's going to happen? Is this going to continue? So, yeah, company morale is a big thing. And most definitely, the work product will fall off when people think their jobs aren't safe.
To lead to people making the best work, and how that won't be good for the company. Well, that stuff I think all does stand. So yes, this is not necessary. This is layoffs to increase margin, not just duplication of roles, even though some of that will, of course,
definitely
happen.
True.
Most importantly, I'd say we got to remember games are made by people, and people are more than just their degree, right? They're also their experience on the job. And I mean, come on, you guys all know this, like from your own work. Yes, you can have somebody who's very skilled. It usually takes like 6 months to actually get comfortable in a new job and really be performing your best. So number one, you take a whole bunch of hits in and around that. But there's also just niche specific skills, like even people's personal networks that will add a lot of value to their job. Well, if that person goes, their network goes. That's the sort of thing that goes on. That's just one example. Of course, a lot of these companies are using very bespoke tools. Even just how the company uses Jira. It will be their own company's implementation of Jira. All of those little things that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but do actually matter on a day-to-day basis. Another dimension to this, then, is what Blizzard actually prepared their own staff for. One of the things that people brought up with the merger was saying, hey, there will be job cuts, so a lot of the anti-merger people were bringing up that. But internally, right, people were really excited because basically it was Bobby gone. Activision Blizzard King Corporate will no longer be my boss. Microsoft Gaming will be my boss. And for the most part, we all sort of saw that as being preferable. At the
Well, let's be honest. The people who didn't get laid off, the people who still have their job, sad for the people who don't, but the people who do still have their job, I think they're in a better place than they were when it was just Activision Blizzard. I still think Microsoft's going to give them more creative freedom in terms of where Blizzard can go without Activision oversight. Well, I don't know. I feel like it's still better for the game, better for the employee. The people who it's not better for are the ones who lost their jobs, obviously.
Very least that some first-party incentives could lead to slightly less mercenary decision-making than the third-party incentives, or perhaps would lead to longer-term decision-making than the third-party incentives that, say, well, Activision themselves would have faced. Now, the thing is, staff were assured by their own leadership that this merger would not result in mass layoffs. Just as an example, here's a tweet from Osama Dorias, who's an ex-Blizzard developer who said this is following assurances from Blizzard leadership that this would not happen. Obviously, it happened. That's going to be very bad for people's trust in leadership. And if people don't trust their leaders, they are not going to be doing good work.
I mean, look, it'll definitely take time for Microsoft to rebuild confidence with these employees, that's for sure, because if they're just doing this over and over, the morale is going to be at an all-time low. And DJ, I agree, a lot of Blizzard titles have been failing. So, I mean, they certainly needed corrective action, that's for sure. They couldn't continue down the same path they were. This survival game was probably going to be a dud. Let's be honest, it probably sucked. So, it had to be cut.
A particularly rough thing. So now, the same amount of work has got to be done by a smaller number of people, and likely
You're going to rate, Cadence. We're going to rate, don't worry.
As well. Let's dive in then to specific game teams and what sort of stuff is being impacted. Number one, let's talk about the survival game. So, Jason Schreier dropped a report here that actually gave us some newer details. Number one, this game was in development since 2017. It was, I think, originally pitched by Craig Amai, who, if you played World of Warcraft Legion, he was fairly involved in artifact weapons as like a key feature for that expansion. So he does a pitch. This game, of course, ends up being picked up. This was potentially a game targeting 2026, but the staff apparently thought this was an ambitious target. This game was originally prototyped on Unreal Engine, but it was switched because Blizzard executives wanted 100-player large-scale maps. So instead, they used an internal engine called Synapse. The thing is, though, this engine was intended originally for mobile games and to essentially be akin to something like EA's Frostbite. Now, in this case, like, you do get a lot of pros by having your own engine. I mean, there's license fees, that sort of thing, and the engine is architected to suit your needs specifically. Of course, executives would then see, oh, look at this, we're consolidating our tech stack, we're going to have more cross-functionality amongst our engineering teams and all of this stuff, but what ends up happening is FIFA, Battlefield, and like, I don't know, Mass Effect, Andromeda, all have the same bugs because they're all made in Frostbite. Obviously, Electronic Arts showed us that, well, they just showed us a hell of an example of this going wrong. It's, of course, very notable that Respawn Entertainment, one of their absolutely more successful studios, they were not using that engine. Unreal is used for the Jedi games, and I believe they're still on Source, actually. Yeah, the Source engine for Apex Legends. This is honestly quite surprising to me, just from that perspective of risk management. I mean, surely doing the internal engine, yeah, I can see all the upsides, but is that just not way too risky? But basically, this engine, Synapse, did not have the functionality the team needed. They would essentially then prototype in Unreal because they couldn't prototype the game in Synapse, but they knew that all the stuff they were doing in Unreal would just be discarded later on. And I mean, the idea of using a more sort of simple, fast engine to do some quick prototyping or grayboxing, yeah, like people do that in Unity all the time. Don't want to like break for NDAs, but like there's quite a lot of like even, you know, sort of AAA games from big studios where they'll actually do a graybox prototype in something like Unity, and then they'll move it into their production engine. So yeah, that's just very, very bad. I think we can all see how that would lead to development hell.
Yep.
For what it's worth, the things that I
think the
heard
game probably
basically is
sucked.
that this game was in development hell, a lot of bureaucracy and problems as well impacting its development. And in terms of team size, I've actually heard now from multiple sources.
Yeah, I agree, Pawnstar.
So thank you for reaching out. I've heard from multiple sources that this team was 250. So this is...
Oh my god, 250 people developing a failing game for 6 years? Oh my god. Oh, no wonder.
Representing very
No wonder they
significant
cut it.
job cuts. People essentially, well, actually, here's the tweet. The entire survival team just got laid off. So that's what one member of that team said.
Yeah.
So you would have thought that from the memo sent to staff that we talked about yesterday, that this is mostly a case of maybe a bit of downsizing of that team.
It was
but
for
just
sure
sort of redeploying onto
a hellhole,
newer,
that
more
game.
promising projects. It really doesn't seem that that is an accurate representation. I mean, I'm sure that some people are being moved on to other projects, but it does seem that that is the minority, not the majority, so it does look
Yeah,
like
this was also a survival game, different category of game. It would have been hard for them to transition them to anything else. Like when Titan failed, it was an MMO. They were making an MMO, so it's pretty easy to just bring those people back to the WoW team. But I don't know, this survival game, yeah, they probably just cut everybody. They also hired a lot of people just for this game, so they probably got fired.
the majority of that team is actually gone. And of course, this is very different to, say, the Overwatch situation. They had their MMORPG called Project Titan, and Project Titan was basically meant to be the successor to World of Warcraft. Thing is, though, development held
Yeah,
for a very
that's just
long
what I was
time,
saying.
and then it
Yeah.
morphed into Overwatch. In this case, they decided that they need to cut their losses, and certainly the implication from a lot of the reporting, including Jason's reporting, is that unless it's in an existing franchise and it's a safe bet, you're out. You're screwed. Now,
This failure is what led to Metzen retiring. Yeah, this is why he left. He couldn't handle this shit anymore. This stressed him out.
that is something that I think in an era of there being a lot of market instability,
Fucking
I think
chat.
we can understand that decision making. The bit here that's quite rough is people having, potentially up to 6 years of their career just kind of yoked into the bin. They don't have a thing in their portfolio from that. So that is particularly rough. So as an example, if you like World of Warcraft and you're seeing all of these very bullish things the Warcraft team is doing, their higher cadence of delivering content, and some of the insinuations of like more than just one Warcraft thing happening, this is likely good news. They did talk about some newer, more
think WoW's in a good
promising
spot.
projects. I've got to imagine those are within existing IP. So I think we can all understand that as a safe bet. Again, though, this is just real rough. Okay, so that's the survival game. Next, let's just move on to some other things we've learned from game developers. Okay, Overwatch actually seems to have been particularly impacted here. We are seeing, again, this is people saying,
Overwatch,
oh, it's
my
duplicate
God.
roles. It ain't duplicate roles. We're seeing animators, designers, and encounter designers reporting that they have been impacted by these layoffs. What is specific, though, is then looking through the LinkedIns and more of the tweets and what these people have said, it really does seem that the team working on PvE content for the game is having heavy losses.
Shit.
There's also a chance that this could include like seasonal events, and certainly PvE, that would mean like the the paid invasion events. Now,
Basically, the thing that made Overwatch 2 the 2, right? It gave the 2 to Overwatch. That's gone. That's been gone, and now they just cut the people that were working on it. So yeah, it's Overwatch 1.5. It's a patch.
remember here, that team, especially in the latter there with Invasion, they were hamstrung by the way that their work was sold. And of course, anything that they were doing that to implement into a totally
Overwatch
redesigned
0.9.
Overwatch
It
2.
lost 'em.
And this is after years and years of their work was essentially thrown into the bin.
It's sad, man,
So
'cause this
as an
game was good.
overall like employment experience, even if you could make an argument that this is a wise thing to cut, that you wouldn't be seeing ROI in content like this, we, I think, can all admit that this was just a big shit show and will have been an awful experience for those people. Something the Overwatch community no doubt will empathize with because, well, go watch the original Overwatch 2 reveal, and think about what was kind of promised there. Moving on to D4
bad.
then, there have been some team losses there, like environmental artists, animators, that sort of thing. What I have not seen that much, though, is Warcraft. We'll get onto that in a little bit.
Warcraft is their baby. I'm telling you, man, Microsoft knew what they were doing when they bought Blizzard Activision. Everyone was like, oh, it's all because of Call of Duty. It's all Call of Duty, bro. That's why Mountain Dew's in Call of Duty. No. World of Warcraft was a huge part one of the biggest for sure, if could even be the biggest reason why they made this acquisition. You got to see it. Amazon and all these studios, they see the potential of MMOs still going forward. They do. I think there's a lot of potential for MMOs, and Microsoft essentially with this purchase bought the most popular one. So, of course, they want to see WoW succeed, and that's good for us who play the game. I definitely see the future is bright for WoW.
I suppose what's weird there is Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 are seemingly good revenue generators. We're going to dive into this more in a future video. Obviously, a lot's been delayed because of this breaking news. But 5 days after launch, D4's boxed sales outstripped the estimated figures for Baldur's Gate 3 last year. And then Overwatch 2, yes, decline over time, but it had reportedly had $225 million in revenue by March of last year. We have a detailed breakdown of that in the pipeline, but that's just some numbers to give you context for today's story. Both of these teams, though, are ones that were gearing up for huge efforts this year. We have Overwatch's kind of redesign of monetization and some core gameplay aspects, including, you know, like Battle Pass, all of that stuff that they've been trying to roll out this year. So no doubt that will be impacted to a degree. And of course, for Diablo 4, it's preparing for its first expansion. And of course, this is also happening right as they have had a season launch that I commend them for trying. It does seem that the design was a bit of a swing and a miss, though, for a lot of players. Moving on to Warcraft, be it World of or be it Rumble, I've basically not seen that much insofar as like very core development roles go, but they are absolutely heavily going to be impacted by other changes that we'll be talking about. I think the core here is, look, Warcraft does actually do really well. It makes a hell of a lot of money. Classic stuff has been popping off very strong. Revenue per user in modern World of Warcraft, I think that's only going to be up based on like where it would have been in the past, just because of how they've been monetizing it and their content cadence, that sort of thing. And it has showed essentially historically strong retention stats. Just for a quick anecdote, the third season of Mythic Plus, and Mythic Plus is one of its end game pillars, we can actually track its data via the Armory API. And its third season has performed better than its second season. Like, it's actually went up.
Makes sense.
So that is quite a surprising thing. It bucks the trend. They've been just, great retention.
It makes sense for two reasons. One, the season's great. I like the dungeon pool. I like everything about it. It's been the most fun I've had playing Mythic Plus in quite a while. And the other reason is the hype from the Metzen presentation at BlizzCon, I think, brought a lot of people back. I think people are down for the World Soul Saga. They like the story. They're excited for where it's going, and they decided to jump in during Season 3 of Dragonflight. And there's so many good catch-up mechanics, they could easily do that. So it's a twofold reason, and it's a successful season, that's for sure.
Sort of thing. So really for me, no doubt that Warcraft is still getting quite a lot of investment. My worries would just be RTO and hiring freezes impacting their fairly ambitious content plans to the point where quality of delivery would suffer. As an example, take like the most recent patch. One of its big features was, return to Gilneas. Did they tick the box of shipping that feature? Yes. Was it way shorter than everyone expected?
Yeah, it was.
Absolutely. And maybe that is one such example of that sort of thing. Now, let's move on to Activision. There is more bad news there. Obviously, a lot of people make Call of Duty. It's an infinite, production line. Tough process, and every studio has been impacted. Charlie Intel reporting that they've seen layoffs from Infinity Ward, Sledgehammer, Raven, Treyarch, High Moon, and more. According to Insider Gaming's sources, Sledgehammer Games had already planned to downsize their office as a result of a shift to remote working, but now they've also had around 30% of a headcount layoff.
Damn, 30%.
That's one of the things you may see here. Oh, this is only like 8% or whatever of Microsoft Gaming. Yeah, but the bit of Microsoft Gaming that is disproportionately being targeted is Activision Blizzard King Studios.
Right.
So that's why for Sledgehammer, it can be 30%. Toys for Bob have got an estimated loss of over 30 staff from their remaining complement of around 85. This is a studio that already had actually been pretty impacted by being heavily dependent on contractor work. Of course, whenever you're heavily dependent on that contractor work, things are not always great. We've certainly had examples of that we've talked about. I mean, Halo Infinite and its content problems, issues that they allegedly had in 343i, actually retaining people because of some like contracting rules. It was a bunch of specifics
Halo
from a while
Infinite.
ago, but that's obviously going to be a rough.
I honestly think Halo just needs a battle royale. I love Halo. I've always been a Halo fan. It's one of the first games that I ever like truly got addicted to. Oh man, Halo 2 is amazing, but I don't know what it is about Halo Infinite. It's just not it. It's just not. I tried it. I really tried to get into it. I played it for a while, but I don't know. It needs a BR or something. And I'm not even a big battle royale guy, but it just needs something more infinitely playable than what it currently has.
Thing.
Didn't they
That
tease
is
one or no?
brutal.
I don't know. I haven't heard
As
anything
well,
about it.
QA reportedly being like I mean, okay, I was going to
It
say
got boring,
decimated
yeah.
because that's a really big word. Decimated, though, that is, it's I mean, I know the Romans did. I'm going to assume that they invented it, but it would be punishment of 1 out of every 10. These are a lot worse than decimation. And maybe if I knew more Latin, I'd be able to say some fancy word. Okay, there are some extra factors. So Jez Corden of Windows Central has got quite a lot of sources across the industry, including in and around Microsoft, for fairly obvious reasons. He's reporting that the plan going forward is the outsourcing of community management. Now, for something like World of Warcraft, that is going to be really rough. A game like that totally depends on a strong customer support team, and this is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, Blizzard had best class support. They were doing this stuff in-house. It was generally great. And there are still some examples of that existing up until the current day. That has absolutely decreased over time, though. The quality of customer support from Activision Blizzard has been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. This is something that
Nice.
so many players have noticed.
Like many
Of
companies.
course, that's going to be correlating with the headcounts and the working conditions of the people in those departments, because those departments had already experienced plenty of cuts. As an example, in the EU, number one, we know that their Cork office, Cork, Ireland, so just a little bit down from us, that's been particularly heavily hit. Obviously, their office...
I feel like a lot of companies post-COVID realize that customer service doesn't have to be as, big of a deal as it once was. Because a lot of people ate shit during COVID. That's the truth. They ate shit and they kept paying. I mean, just look at Disney, how much they started charging for different things and doing all these restrictions. And guess what? People kept coming to the parks. I think a lot of companies realize that, we don't need all this customer service. Because the customers are going to be the customers, whether we serve them or not. And that's the truth. A lot of that shit is... You want to rip your hair out? Try calling Xfinity customer service. Comcast is fucking horrible. It's horrible. Not to be like, a jerk or anything, but they can't speak English. They're just reading off of a prompt on their computer half the time, and they don't give a shit to fix your problem. They're just trying to stop you from talking to the manager and then derailing the conversation and then sending you off on your way. That shit's frustrating as hell. So, I mean, this is just... I feel like this is a symptom of COVID that hung over, and it's here to stay. Customer service has gone to shit and will remain shit. And the way people, change that is they speak with their dollar, but I don't know. People just keep paying anyways.
in Versailles, in France, that was entirely closed. You're wondering why customer support isn't as good. Well, maybe the same customer support staffer has now got to do twice the tickets per hour. And I'm sure a lot of people will understand how brutal and numbers-driven the likes of customer support can be from I suppose a KPI angle. Just how management actually sort of deals with that sort of thing. And I don't want to do any specifics, but I've also heard in the grapevine that the way in which things have been handled is particularly rough in Cork. Yeah, just generally, if you are like in any sort of like European country, your customer support's probably going to be getting significantly worse. I mean, also the same in the States, because their plan basically is, outsourcing. Then another thing that Jez found out is that they are shutting down departments dedicated to bringing Xbox games to physical retail. Jez also references some digital-only Xbox console leaks. It seems like that's what a sort of mid-cycle refresh of the X essentially could be. We're going to dive into that more again in a future report we've been working on, but yeah. One way to go all digital is to just not sell your game physically. And with the likes of, say, Hellblade 2, we're already seeing that. Then moving on, we've got Battle.net. This is a really rough one. The Battle.net team has been impacted, honestly, from what I understand, fairly brutally.
I don't see Battle.net sticking around. I bet you they're gonna put it on the Xbox app. They're gonna put. I mean, this is the app right here. I have it on my computer because I have Game Pass. But I could totally imagine Microsoft, taking this shit, right? Putting it here. WoW will just be here. Everything else will be here. Why are they gonna run two platforms? You have chat, you have everything, you have your friends list. Why are they gonna run two separate platforms? They're just gonna merge them. I don't see Battle.net sticking around at all. I don't. I think it's going to be axed pretty soon.
Rough. From what I understand, a lot of them were based in the Austin office, and the Austin office is.
They already have their own launcher.
Screwed.
There's no reason for it.
So that's rough. Now, it's not like Battle.net is just going to get deleted, but I suppose
think it will eventually.
Why does Xbox need the Xbox Game Store and Battle.net?
Yep.
Will it be in their interest? Will it be in their 5 or 10 year plan to actually merge the platforms together? Now, certainly,
say you want to put Overwatch on Game Pass. Game Pass is all on Xbox's own game launcher. What, are you going to have Overwatch on Battle.net and the Xbox game launcher? Or are you going to tell people to download Battle.net even though they already have Game Pass and to play a different game? No. They're just going to merge them. There's no chance it sticks
World
around.
of Warcraft player and, even say
all
an
of it
older
will be
game
Game
like
Pass
StarCraft
eventually.
2
Yep.
that I absolutely love.
I just want to know if they'll make the
it's
WoW
Warcraft
stuff
3
part of it.
community mod called Chronicles of the Second War. Like, I don't want to have to open the Xbox app on my computer to play those. That would not be good. I mean, even for another thing that's a concern, like, it's really handy being able to play World of Warcraft on a computer with that logo on it. I'm even a little bit concerned about that. Not that I think they would. No, actually, no. I mean, even take Counter-Strike. No, it actually fucking could happen.
Yeah,
so it's hard to know what will happen with Battle.net. I would definitely like to have some clarity, like, officially there.
VNet's gone, boys.
I don't know, just at least important for the customer experience. So moving on through things then, just another example here. Basically, the entirety of non-outsourced Blizzard customer service, including myself, has just been laid off as alignment with Microsoft. That's one example. Jez Corden also, backing that up with his sources. I can also back that up with what I've heard from people. Brutal.
We'll see, Cadence.
And
at
the end of the day, like, look, you know from watching this channel, from just playing games, customer support is broadly quite rough in our industry. Bugs are a real problem in our industry. None of that's going to get better in a world like this. Another thing I would say is by doing customer support in-house, Blizzard actually had a fairly unique strength. People could go and be a game master, and actually quite a lot of the community managers of World of Warcraft, they started as game masters. And I think there is a value in that because as a GM, you're consistently seeing player problems, player complaints. That always did help. One thing that I can certainly say, and I've been very critical, I mean, like, there are plenty of people on the WoW team who have, have me blocked. And, so I've been very critical of WoW at times. Like, to the point where I say if it was Creative Assembly, I would have been on the blacklist such a long time ago.
There used to be a freaking GM island. Like, GMs used to be in the game constantly. You remember you'd whisper, they'd whisper you, all this shit, they'd pop up sometimes. It was like almost like this mythological creature back in the day. Like, in-game GMs were such a cool feature of WoW. That's just not a thing anymore.
Teams I've always found have been super aligned with players, and when it kind of comes to the stuff that matters,
I saw one in game before too.
Absolutely, not dicks, and they understand the player sort of perspective, and a lot of that I think is because they started as players and then GMs. So that is rough. Now we're going to be getting the same, almost always very shitty, generic, outsourced
you're going to call a foreign country and
almost everybody else is dealing with. Now
they're just going to type what you're saying into some AI engine and just read off the answer. They don't actually know shit about the game
with Microsoft
or the product that they're servicing.
Cutting. Again, this didn't happen with Zenimax. They didn't feel they needed to do it back when that merger happened, and it has disproportionately, fallen on Activision Blizzard. Now, people have been axed from Zenimax. As an example here, we've got Devin McCarthy, who worked at Bethesda. Ethan Gatch, who writes, I believe, for Kotaku, just picked up, like, this person has been there since the awful Fallout 76 launch through to the game's current revival. Imagine the amount of work that person will have had to put in to actually help that happen. And the just goodwill of community, specific Fallout 76 knowledge, that is very rough. I think we all know how good community managers can absolutely make, well, they can be true game changers. Just when it comes to how, I would say, seen, understood a player base will feel, a
Bring
really
back
good
the
example of
in-game
that
GMs,
going
man.
fairly wrong was how Creative Assembly had treated things for such a long time. Plenty of other examples from companies. So rather brutally, we're losing that. And I think a perfect note to bring this to a close on is the amazing post of Jorge Murillo, who said in his final message, "Look, I'm just happy we were able to provide some value to the shareholders." Guess who
Damn.
just hit 3 trillion market cap? Brutal enough situation. Let me
damn.
know if you've been impacted, you want to reach out, something you want to get off your chest, any things that you think are underreported in this story that you would like audiences to know, tips@bellular.games. You can reach me there. We will have daily videos, honestly, for the foreseeable future. We have so much in production right now. If you want to support the team that is doing the research, bringing you this content, well, you can check out bellular.ghost.io. That's essentially our own platform. We do Loading Screen there, which is our daily newsletter, which it's awesome. You should get Loading Screen. It's the best way to support what we're doing, get early access to our content, and yeah, all that good stuff on our members lounge, which
That's crazy.
Certainly we've all been talking
That's some
about
crazy
talking
shit.
about this over there. It's been rough. Okay, that's it for me. Hope you have a good weekend, and yeah, I'll see you next time.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, we knew that a lot of this was gonna happen, but to the scale it's happened and everything else, it's a combination. Industry-wide layoffs plus an acquisition merger, just a perfect storm of shit for a lot of these employees, unfortunately.